So I'd like to just share some thoughts that I have. I was considering at one stage moving from SketchUp over to Blender, and I've done the jump like 101 times, gone to Blender, opened it, got so despondent because, for example, the right mouse button was doing what the left mouse was supposed to do, and it just wasn't nice. And then I had this mental block. Even now when version 2.8 came out, and everybody was raving about it, I was still feeling anxious, and I got 2.8, downloaded it, started working in it. A few things started feeling a little bit easier, but it still was very foreign, and I just had a mental block. I uninstalled it again, and then I heard that Unreal was busy acquiring Twinmotion, and that they would be supporting that, and you could get it for free up until November 2019. So I downloaded, excitingly got the models across there, but it just didn't gel for me also. It didn't feel nice and intuitive. It's easy to use, but the fact that I had to get the model from SketchUp, where I spend 90% of my time doing the setups for what I do. So I'm not an architect, I'm not a character modeler. I do things like this for clients where they want some sort of activation happening at an airport. So I create a mock-up in SketchUp, and I've found the most incredible render engine that goes with SketchUp, which is Enscape. And I'll show you a little bit here just to show you why I'm so excited about it. But I felt that the direction that SketchUp was going with Trimble being in charge maybe might not be the proper one. They went into a subscription model, and it's expensive software, and Blender's free. And I had this tussle between whether I should move over to Blender. And I think my biggest sort of mental block was that I went to Blender and I wanted to use Blender to replace the current work I do for clients. And then when I found it difficult just to put up a simple building, or certain keystrokes weren't working as I thought they should, I was getting despondent. And a light bulb went on for me that I actually decided, look here, don't try and replace SketchUp or Cinema 4D by using Blender, else you're going to constantly be comparing, and they're different packages. So use it for what its purpose is, and just get on with, if I could say, get over myself with this thing. So once I made that decision, I had kind of peace in my mind as to, I'm going to stick with SketchUp and Inkscape because now I've worked out a brilliant workflow for myself. I will tentatively look at Blender and see how it operates, but not on the premise that I want to see if Blender can replace SketchUp or Blender can replace Cinema 4D, or I'm going to move all my work there immediately. I took on the whole mindset that I'll carry on doing what I'm doing now, but I will spend a few hours learning to understand Blender, learning to use the tool just as a tool on its own. And the advantage that I have is that I have a bit of 3D background, so Blender might be a bit easier to learn. So I'm not going to compare keystrokes with it, movements of mouse with it. I'm just going to go there on a blank slate. And when I made that decision, that was about the greatest thing I could have done, because it set me free now. So I stopped looking at Blender through the eyes of SketchUp or Cinema 4D. And you might be using some other 3D software, and you might be finding the similar thing. If you're using Modo, you might be going there and then feeling, okay, in Modo I can do this thing 10 times faster, but now these keys and all these shortcuts don't just work for me, and then you jump out of it again. So just treat it like an independent package. It's free, it's not costing you anything to learn, but go there and spend a few hours a week or a day to start educating yourself on it, because I think it's an extremely powerful program. Once I started doing that, I started having the total different approach, it made Blender pop out to me at just a different level. Now, this is Blender 2.8 I'm talking about. The versions before this, I believe the guys were complaining, and those who got used to it were just working around different things. And the nice thing I found out about Blender, it is quite similar to SketchUp in the ability to bring in add-ons. They call it add-ons in SketchUp. It's extensions to, you know, like if you look at this panel here, all of these here on top are extensions that add things, features that don't exist inside SketchUp itself. So these are all add-ons, and there's hundreds of them that you can use. So my real breakthrough was when I decided SketchUp will be SketchUp, Cinema 4 will be Cinema 4, Blender will be Blender, and I'm not going to let them compete against each other. I'm going to see how they meet my need. So let me show you what I've been doing for clients. So this is work I do, paid for work I do with clients. This client came to me and they wanted to develop a little pod unit that they put into airports, so they needed some visuals in the airport. With Inkscape, it's literally, I built it in SketchUp, so there's no consideration for any other strange setups. And let me go into the building now. But before I go into the building, I'm here at this scene 14. I'm going to just enable Inkscape, and you can see here in this window here you have a dialog. I'm going to enable it now. You'll see this is real time. When I move this around, can you see this? And I'm busy recording at the moment, so this is how incredibly fast it is. And if you want more realism on stuff, you just add the material properties, and there's a whole stack of them. You can add assets in, there's material properties, you can add in roughness, albedos, you add in bump maps and everything. But I'm not going into Inkscape now. I just want to show you what my whole thinking was about the whole process, and the reason why I was kind of skeptical about moving away from SketchUp, because now SketchUp in Inkscape just does it for me. It works well. So if I go to scene 3, we're navigating into the building, and if you can see this on this side here, I have now the real-time renderer. And if I move to another section in the building, it updates like this. And for you to see it in a bit of a better view, I'm going to just maximize this window. And pretty much this is, you can see it's still quite noisy while it's clearing up, but this gives you the look and feel of what you want in this place. Now, all of these are things I've created. These windows were just squares put down here. So if I go inside here, I can shift the time of day, move the sun around. It can have it in real time, even in this render window. So when I do the final render, it will be much clearer than this. But the ability to add properties, like if you look at the tiles here, they've got a bit of smoothness or reflectivity on it. All of these things are set. You go into the Inkscape render engine, and you set that material properties on the SketchUp materials, or you could bring in your own materials. These assets are brought in as proxies, so you can have a proxy. Let me just show you. If I do this move, I'm bringing it through here, let go of it, you'll see in the model here it immediately updates. So this for me is totally exciting, and this is what I use for clients. So I can give clients quick iterations of work. I can do fly-throughs of it. It is just extremely powerful. So when I was looking at now moving across to something like Blender came out now with, oops, what did I do with this person? Let me just put it down here. Blender came out now with a real-time render engine called Eevee. And, you know, after a while of me looking at it now, I realized that it's actually very similar to Unreal Engine in its way, how you do post-processing and all that sort of stuff. So for me, Inkscape is so much closer. It's almost, I can call it the perfect render engine for SketchUp. If SketchUp had to come up with a render engine, this would be the perfect design if they designed it like Inkscape has done it for SketchUp itself. So fly-throughs, creating videos. Here you have executable standalone files. You can create virtual reality experiences. It is incredible, the software. So when I looked at Blender, I was thinking, can Blender replace all of these nice things? Not just SketchUp and the building thing, which it's quite fast with, but I knew that if I got to work with the tools in Blender, I probably could model fast also. But just the whole quick setup, render, quick iterations, when a client comes back and says, you know, change, for example, these stanchions, change them to this, that, and the other. It's easy to do. Will I be able to do it in Blender? And that was where my mental block came in, as I said. So the whole thought about treating it as two different stuff liberated me. So that's what I can advise to you if you are busy with a 3D package and looking to say, can I replace this thing with Blender? Don't start off in that way. Don't compare them. Don't try and see how they'll fulfill, because if you've been working with a package for a long while, you'll already be comfortable, and Blender will be 10 times more complicated than the one you're using usually. Until you learn Blender on its own, and then once you're very familiar with Blender, then you can compare. It's kind of comparing apples with apples. So yeah, in this place here now, if I go to scene 10, you'll see how fast this updates. Go to scene 11. Okay, I'm flying through the wall. But this is how beautiful it is. I mean, I'm really looking at a real-time render, which I can, and I'm busy screen recording and everything, but I can move through it and have a look at it. When it renders out more clean and so forth. And you know, you have the usual light bleeding over there, which clears up when you do your final render. But this is real time. This is being generated real time. And these things here, all I've got is photos. These are just normal tiles. This is the carpet that comes from SketchUp. It's a SketchUp carpet. But you're able to set the bump map and everything inside Inkscape. So it uses the albedo, the diffuse map, and from the same thing you just click bump map. It creates a bump map, and then you can modify the bump map and roughness maps and everything. So, and they're on version 2.5 now, still early days with this company. So I'm very excited about this product, and I most likely will stay with my quick iterations here, but I am busy learning Blender now, and once I get familiar with it, I'll probably open up my scope to using it for other stuff. Okay, so my biggest problem was my ignorance of Blender, my ignorance of the tools, and my comparison between the stuff I was using and Blender. So once I stopped doing that comparison, and once I started learning Blender, it became much more pleasant to start working with. So I'm going to show you how I got into using the Blender, what approach I used. Okay, so this is SketchUp and Inkscape. Beautiful. I don't think I'm going to replace this in a hurry for my clients' needs. Okay, so I'll just close that window and close this. Hopefully it will close quickly. It's going to ask to save. I'm saying no. So, okay, when you open up SketchUp, it takes a little while to open. If you look at Blender here, I'm going to click Blender. This is 2.8. According to all the people that use Blender, it is totally different to what Blender was before. And the reason for this was that the guys at the Blender organization decided to get all the top developers, pull them together, take them to Amsterdam and let them sit there and start working on bringing all the features together from the user interface and everything. So the team literally came together. Because it's an open source project, people work from all over the world. But you somehow need that glue to keep the whole system together. And it's because of them coming to work together that they were able to make everything now work and streamline. There was no major debates. There was one project person who drove the project. And they started aligning it with all other 3D programs, from using the left mouse button click. They gave you the preference of switching it back to the right if you did, but the default was left. The gizmos that are here, which were never here before. There's a lot of brilliant things in here. I didn't know they existed, but I'm glad I only came on board after 2.8. I think I would have frustrated myself if I tried to learn the previous versions. Just to look here, General is the normal 3D editing. They've got a beautiful 2D animation thing where you can draw in almost like a pen. You draw on the screen and color it, and you can animate it. It can have all its animation. You can look at YouTube, you'll see a couple on there. It's doing 2D in a 3D environment, so you can mix 2D and 3D together. Their sculpting is quite awesome. I don't do sculpting at all, but I just took onto the tools, fiddled with it a bit, and it's quite awesome. The visual effects, and then video editor, so it's got all these things built in. And initially when you look at it, you think like, why are they doing this, kind of being 5 applications in one? But if you notice all the silent companies that are coming through now, there've been ones that have been around for years, and they've had software and everything, and they've been buying over other companies and keeping each of the different assets that they bought as separate units. Like Adobe bought over like a lot of Illustrator kind of companies, and they merged them in. And then you've got Photoshop, and then you've got Audition, which was Cool Edit before, the audio section. So they bought in all these companies, and now it's become such a massive company with so many divisions, but you buy individual packages. Whereas these silent companies that are coming in, like Blackmagic Design, who develop hardware for video, they brought out Resolve, which they make totally free. There's a studio version which you pay for, but it's got like 5 or 10% features more than the free version. You can literally build great productions with the free version. It's not that limited at all. They might as well have given the whole version free, because the free version can do pretty much everything. And that has a full audio editing suite. It's got a video editing suite. It's got a effects node-based compositing system. It's got color grading in it. Everything is built into it. So it's a suite of things all in one. I've moved away from Adobe now, moving to using the Serif range, Affinity Designer, Affinity Publisher, and Affinity Photo. And pretty much when you're in Affinity Designer, not Affinity Designer, Affinity Publisher, you have 2 little buttons that if you want to go and edit the photo, you click on that and your whole interface switches into the photo app. When you want to work in vector art, you click a button. It's all integrated now. It's all part of one. So it's like literally having a Photoshop with Illustrator built into it, with InDesign, all in one application. And it's extremely powerful. There are a lot of people that have moved across there, mainly because they have a single purchase policy like it used to be in the old days. And when Adobe went all the subscription based, there were a lot of people that jumped ship. And this is what the Serif Affinity range has been able to fill that gap there. And it's brilliant tools. I use it routinely. I've moved away from the Adobe suite. Okay, enough ranting about that. Let me just show you my approach on how I started looking at it. So I'll go through it like I saw the windows and my thinking process. And this might be able to help you when you're looking at Blender and how should you start. First of all, I started by going and clicking General. You could click General here, but I clicked off here, and this is how I started. Okay, now the thing that most of these tutorials talk about is they joke actually about the light. This is a light, this is a camera, and this is a primitive here. So first things I wanted to find out is how to navigate around the space, how to move objects around the space, how to insert objects in the space. Now because I'm in the 3D space and I've been going through different renderers, I've been using a bit of Arnold, a bit of Octane, Redshift, using TheaRender and now Inkscape. I was tempted to try and go and do a quick render and see what it looks like and the quality. But I thought, let me hold back and just start to get comfortable with the features and how to move around. Similarly to when you get a new vehicle, just make sure where the buttons are, how you switch things on, how you turn things on, how you move around. Once you're able to move around and move objects around in 3D, then you can start looking at something further. So that was my approach, and I literally went to my mouse. I didn't try the keyboard or shortcuts or anything. I went to the mouse and I looked first for preferences, because under preferences I wanted to see if there was anything that I would recognize that probably I could set up even from the word get-go. So I clicked preferences. I went through all the different preferences and nothing really stood out for me to go and address at this stage because I didn't know quite a few of these things. When I got to add-ons, I realized this is like extensions in SketchUp or plugins with any other software. But the thing that interested me was this key map. When I went to key map, I saw here they gave the ability for you to make your selection with a right click. Now, it by default is left, so people that worked in versions before could probably still go to the right. So they didn't kind of leave everyone behind, and those that were so used to the right side. A right mouse button click, leave them behind. They could still go and do that, but it's always recommended to stay with the left because all other softwares, all other 3D softwares work with the left mouse button click. The space bar thing I discovered afterwards when it was on play. If you press the space bar, then it's going to play this animation area here. For me, I wanted the space bar to be a precursor to certain other movements. I only discovered later. So when I came through here, I looked at the left and that was about the only thing I saw and closed it. But later I discovered that I could change the space bar to function with the tools, which is the gizmos of moving, rotating, and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's all I changed. And I came here and I said save preferences because I saw that on a tutorial. Okay, so now this is the approach that I had. I grabbed the mouse, left mouse button, click, move it, nothing happened. I clicked on here, it made the selection, left mouse button, and it started moving the object around. Okay, so I'm moving the object around now and I'm thinking now, okay, so where am I moving it in space? When I looked at the tutorial, they said that you could move this object anywhere, but if you pressed an additional button, you could constrain it to a axis. So this is the Z axis and what Y, Z, and the 3 axes. Okay, so when I grab this with the left mouse button, when I press Y, okay, it locked to the Y axis. When I press Z, it locked to the Z axis. When I press X, it locked to the X axis. So I thought, okay, that's quite cool. So if I select this thing here and I move the mouse off it, click off it, nothing will happen. But if I click on it and I move it and then press Y or press Z or X, it will constrain onto that axis. So initially I thought, but where do you get like kind of widgets and all this? I had to stop myself and say, be patient, just work through it first. You know, left mouse button can move a thing and at least you can move the object around. But if I want to turn around here, left mouse button does nothing. A right mouse button, there were a few features which I will have to get to later. So let me see if I go and I click on here and I move, same thing happens, same principle. Now if I go to Y, there we go. If I go to X, if I go to Z, okay, and same principle happens with everything that we select, and I select and move on it. So that seems to be the default. Okay, I accepted that. Now I went for middle mouse, and I moved, and there we went. And I thought this is very similar to SketchUp. This is what SketchUp does, but I had to hold back not to tell myself to compare to SketchUp again. So I got a bit sort of excited now. This kind of feels like I'm familiar with it. But before I went ahead, I tried Alt and left mouse button because that was how Cinema 4D works. So, well, it didn't work like that. It's pretty much more working like a SketchUp environment. Middle mouse button, click there, scroll, yep. And now I tried the last one. If this worked, then literally my navigation in the port was a duplicate of SketchUp. With SketchUp, you press Shift and middle mouse button to pan around. So I tried that, Shift, middle mouse, and there we went. So that for me was very exciting. It was like saying to me, at least one part of the journey now is feeling comfortable. So I went on to the next part of it, and that was to be able to move the specific item. So I could move it by clicking on it, but I didn't know how to do a rotation and all of that. What I did was I looked on this side. I looked on this side and saw there were some icons over here. Now apparently these icons didn't exist in the previous version. None of these gizmos here and these things. So we are fortunate that it is here, but it should have been here, because that's how all programs work. Okay, so at least now I felt a bit more at home. When I looked here, there was the move tool. If I hovered over it, I saw there was a shortcut that came out that said space bar G. Now that space bar is because I set it up in the preferences early. If I didn't choose space bar, it would have asked me for other key combinations. So that's why I did a bit of research on that. So space bar G is for move, rotate is space bar R, size is space bar S. So I thought before I get to the modifiers like adding a space bar and then the letter on the keyboard, I'm going to just try them independently. So I went to R. So first select the item, left mouse, go R. And there we go. This is rotate, but this is now like haphazardly. I thought to myself, if this program is intelligent, it will use the same modifiers. X, let me press X and rotate. Yes, there we go. If I press Y, yes, and if I press Z, okay, click off it. So for me, this was getting exciting because the pattern throughout the program was duplicated. It wasn't going from one place to the next place and then making a rotation in one area totally different to the other and so forth. Okay, so if I wanted to rotate this now, I would go R and then I would choose which axis. But I thought this is a bit tedious to every time R and then choose like Z axis and all that. Isn't there an easier way? Okay, now there's no gizmo on it, so how would I do it? When I watched the tutorial, all they said was select the area, choose the key, and then push the middle mouse button down to constrain it. And you can move. So if you constrain it in this direction, let me show you. R, I push middle mouse button down, and can you see as I'm turning around this axis, it's a bit more difficult here because, but you can see it constrains around certain axes as I'm moving. Okay, it's not just haphazardly moving, it's kind of keeping on the axis. So in a case when I do a rotation, it's probably better that I have a fixed, like a gizmo or something that I can rotate on, the normal 3D thing. Whereas movement, I'm going to see if it works now. So to move the thing, the shortcut key there was B. No, not B, G. And I was thinking, why would they use G? And I just associated it with go, to go. In future, now currently I don't even think about it. I just know G is to move. Okay, but when I got started with it, I was thinking, what would G stand for? So G is to move, R is to rotate, which makes sense, S for scale. And then I used to use T in other programs. I tried T also, and T literally allows you to do all the movements. You have access to all the movements, but we'll get there now. So what I did was I went G, okay, and middle mouse button. So I could be on this axis. That worked. Click, and it went off. Then scale. If I press scale, the thing was sizing. I'm not keeping middle mouse button down. So I thought to myself, there's much use for this, because there's sometimes you don't want to still go grab on the thing. You just want to size it quickly. So this made a lot of sense. So when I'm happy with the size, I can click there. If I want to move it only in one direction size, maybe I try press size, keep middle mouse button down and move along an axis. There we go. Okay, so this made sense. All of these things, I'm keeping middle mouse button down and moving along the axis. And it now applies the actual sizing in that plane. So what I started seeing here that made me very excited was that the keystrokes, the shortcuts and everything, it was just a matter of spending time moving around with them, navigating with them, getting the feel of them. And you know, there's probably a lot of modifying keys that you have. There'll be shift this, shift that, shift that. But as you go along, you'll start to use a certain set of tools. But they are so, I would say they're quite intuitive. Like if I have to think now and I want to size this thing smaller, I could go S and keep the middle mouse button down and just press flat to a point where I want to go down in that direction, and click. If I want to make this area shorter, I can go S and just down there and click. So it feels intuitive now that I know what the things are. But before I kind of finished up with what I was doing, I realized that there were probably a couple of other significant keys that I would have had to experience. So then I just took it step for step. I went through the entire keyboard with no modifiers. So I didn't do a shift or controls setting. I just made a selection and I started off with Z. Okay, I pressed Z and it gave me this dialog box. At the stage when I saw it, I didn't know what each of these things meant. I had an idea, okay, wireframe would be wireframe, but solid would be solid. So if I come this way, if I move over it, it's not selecting it. I assume in the preferences you can select it to hover over and it will change. But in this case, I'm going to click wireframe, so it gives me a wireframe. So I press Z again and go to solid. Okay, so this kind of gave me what it was. I kept selecting the item and I went through the entire keyboard, Z, X, C, and so forth. So you go X, it asks you to delete. Now I don't want to delete. C, it changed this. I don't know what this was for. Press escape and it went away. Okay, then V did nothing. B, I found that this was afterwards box select. So if I have this area, I press B and I can select that area. It will select the area over there and so forth. So I went through the entire keyboard finding out what it was. When I didn't know exactly what the action was, I looked up a tutorial for shortcut keys and so forth, but everything to do with version 2.8. Once I got through that, I started going through some modifying keys like shift, and this is shift A. So here if you go and you say add, you can add different meshes, torus, the usual things into the scene. You can add lights, you can add cameras, etc. But the shortcut key is Shift A, so that became more comfortable. So I went through Shift A. If I go Shift S, you see it's got other features. So it's just about going through each of these shortcuts and finding out which ones that I wanted to use most of the time, and then start playing around with the system, modeling and using the different keys. Now I'd suggest you do it this way and fiddle with it, go through each of the keys, go through the Shift Z, Shift C. Like I know I eventually started remembering Shift C would get your object, I think, centered or wherever it was before. I'm not too sure, but it made some sort of movement. Shift B, this would be, oh, now B is to select that area, where Shift B is also a box, but when I draw around it, it zooms that area into me. So if I have to go to this camera and I go Shift B, it will bring that camera to me. So this is how you discover the things and get the feel of it. First, start with each individual letter. Even go through to the 1, 2, 3. If they do nothing, don't worry about it. For example, if I'm here now and I'm going to press F1 because that's usually for help. If I go here and I press F2, this is literally asking me what the name is. If I look here, it's the name of the cube, but it can give me an easy access. If I just say box, can you see it changes to boxes? So that's a quick key for that one. F3 is to search for stuff. I press escape. F4 is if I want to have a context menu. F5 is doing nothing, so forth. So go through each individual button. if you press on the number pad, number 1, this is showing you a view 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 5. 5 is to give you perspective view. Here it shows perspective and orthographic view. So it's actually quite incredible. If I go to 1 and I'm on this view, all I do is middle mouse button and I start moving it and it will go immediately back to perspective view. So it's brilliant. Go through each single letter, kind of make a mental note of it, then try shift with each of the letters and see what they do. But select an object because sometimes it's relevant to the object. And just go through that. And once you've gone through that, you can go watch a tutorial by a guy, Australian guy, I think. He is a Blender guru. He teaches you how to do this donut and coffee. But when he speaks through it, the nice thing is he covers things and teaches you these basics. But when you're familiar with it, you tend to learn a bit better. You start to see things happening. So that's the way I approached it. And literally I went through doing the navigation. Oh, wait, I almost forgot to show you. So how do I get to this, to get a gizmo? If I click on move here, there's the gizmo that comes, the move gizmo, okay, with the handles. If I click here on rotate, I have the rotate. Okay, if I go on size, if I click off it, it will proportionally size, or on one of the handles it will do it. So this is what we usually used to. Now, if I go back here to select, come back over there. If I want to introduce it without clicking on these buttons here, and that's why I did that preference thing, I press the space bar before the letter. So G is to move. So if I go space bar and G, then it will come with a move tool. Space bar and R, it will rotate. So the space bar brings this dialog up, and I can go and select. So I can space bar and select what I want to. For example, the select tool. If I go space bar, I can do the scale tool. Space bar, I can do the rotate tool. Or if I just want to do it in one quick move without selecting with my mouse, I'll go space S, space R, space G for movement. And as I said, the space T, which for me was in other programs transform, will bring on all three parts of the widget. So if you look close at this, I'll go space T. So here I can size, I can move, and I can rotate. So you could decide to use space T on an object when you're modifying, and it's got all of them. And when you want to remove it again, I think it's double space. Yeah, double space. Or I think double space just opens it up, and if your cursor's on one area, it selects that area. Yeah. So it's not really, you'd go, okay. So I'll go space W. That's to get back to the normal point cursor. So if I was on space transform and I was moving and I want to get back to the normal cursor, is space W, and then I'm back to my normal cursor, my selection. Okay, I think that's enough of a kind of little brief insight into Blender, but that's how I started getting my things together. Now there's a lot of other features along the way, but when you're watching the tutorials now, you'll kind of be able to relate. Oh, I can move that thing, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that. For those of you who are wondering how do you edit and how do you extrude and all that, all of those features are built here. You're going to go to an edit mode, and the shortcut is tab, and you go 3, you can go over touching this polygon surface, press E for extrude, etc. So S for size. So you can do all of these things through there once you're familiar with the keys and how they function, as I've explained to you. And then once you have that under your belt, then you start moving progressively, learning the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I'm still in a learning curve, but literally where I am here now, 2 days after I started with Blender, I can put up a scene, I can use the Eevee renderer, the cycles render, which it was foreign to me how I would even get to use it. But once you do this, watch tutorials, see the next features. Don't try and go to start doing, rendering from the word get-go. Watch that tutorial. I'm going to see if I can find the tutorial. Oh, this was the other thing I just wanted to share also. because of the power of the add-ons. Here's an add-on that I got excited about, which is an architectural add-on where you draw in the walls, drop in furniture and everything. And this is all an add-on. And to activate an add-on, it's basically free. You go there, you go to preferences. If we go to key maps, no, we're going to go to add-ons. I'm going to search for Archi. Okay, there's two here that Blender comes with. This Archimesh apparently is this what they say it's the good one to use. And then you enable it, you save it here, and then it becomes available if there's a little pop-out menu here. Like this menu, if you want to hide it, you press the letter T, press T again, it will pop out, and in is this side, and you pop out. So it's got a few things, and every add-on that you put on will have a little tab here relevant to what you're doing. So if I go into tools, let's see where we are. Is it in here? I don't even know if it's appeared here. But anyhow, it usually comes up here, and then you are able to do that. So for me, that was exciting. So when it comes to building items, like if I was building the airport, in this case, it's building a house. So this entire house was built using this add-on, extruding walls, putting in a wall, glass door that cuts through the wall automatically. All this furniture is done by this add-on. You just drag and drop into it. After 2 days, with a little bit of fiddling, and if you're really focused, you probably can learn much faster than what I am. But let me just show you this. I think it's falling blocks. This was my little impressive animation even, and onto it I was putting here little collision tags and stuff like that. And that's what I'm saying. If you get past that first phase of just navigating between, then every little tutorial you watch to build onto the next will help you through. But here, look here, I'm quite impressed myself. Here's little blocks that are falling. And I've even, you come in here, you click on shading. So here's these little blocks over here, and there's some interesting nodes that work along here. And this might be intimidating initially, but literally you'll get used to it quickly. I thought that it would be complicated, but if I have to say, trust me, it's not that complicated. Okay, and it's just by clicking the shading you come and it will open this node editor. So this is where it is, and this is the real-time Eevee render engine. So if I play back this animation now, let's get it. I think, how do I go back? Is it shift back? You know what? Let me just see where the animation thing is, because now and let me move back to modeling. So here, if I press the shift and space button, there we have our animation in beautiful color. And this is with the Eevee renderer. I'm going to, let me see if I stop it. Yeah, I've stopped it. And if I have to use the cycles renderer, then you're going to go through the normal rendering of, the ray tracing and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so hopefully that's been informative for you. So have a fantastic day, and God bless.